Hey guys, this is National Master Kem Yang back at it with another video. Of course, we will be talking about a part 2 with this week's games against Sethey5. So, this time I was black. Last time you saw that I played a game that was in the Petrov, right? A very tricky Petrov. But now I'm black. So let's spice things up with after Sethey playing e3, I strike out with f5. This is what is called the Dutch defense, and sometimes it could transpose into something called the stone wall, or it could just be the Dutch. So after g3, very interesting. Look at this zigzag formation, right? Now, generally, I suggest against this at the start. The reason being is that if you open up two entrances for your bishop, you're only going to develop your bishop into one of them. But if you develop your knight into the other one, that's acceptable. But if you don't need to develop your knight into the other one, then it may not be necessary to open two forms of entry for the bishop. Just a very small kind of tip that sometimes I feel like, okay, you want to give your bishop two entrances, two ways to get out, but the bishop in the end is only going to go one way. And so in this case, knight f6, b3. I like the fianchetto, and after bishop g2, notice the knight goes to f3. And you could argue that the queen could come to e2, which that could work, or that could be a move. But generally speaking, sometimes I don't know, it just feels like the pawn should just stay on e2, because when on e3, well, I mean, it could be supporting the d4 pawn, but I don't know, just have this feeling that, because I remember I played a few games where I would leave this hole open, and I'd leave this hole open, and then sometimes my bishop developed to here, but then eventually black used the bishop to infiltrate through here. And sometimes it's a little bit, bothersome, but in this case it's okay. Okay, so don't mind the rambling there, just a thought. So after e5, d4, I played e4. I'm setting up this sort of barrier, this sort of big triangle here, right? So after knight fd2, castles, castles. Now, you might be thinking, okay, what do I do, right? We are nearing the development end. And here I play c6. The reason being, I want to play d5. I want to create this pyramid, right? This pyramid structure. So I want to complete my pyramid. So in white's position, what should white do, right? And so usually black will be the one pushing on the queen side. So once after I play d5, black is going to play queen e8, g5, right? Queen e8, g5, queen h5, knight g4, f4, something like that. Breakthrough on the king side. So knowing that, what does white do? White's not going to sit on the queen side. White's not going to sit on the queen side just for the king side waiting to defend. White usually attacks on the king side, or on the queen side, my bad. So after c4, b4, a4, a5, b5, knight c3. So that's white's plan in these positions. Black's plan is to break through this way. White is charging this way, so it's sort of like a double-edged position. That's what they call it when we're trying to do different things. So after knight c3, I play d5. Now, I would consider knight c3 a little bit of an inaccuracy because I feel like the pawn should come first, and then you could bring your knight here. But okay, knight c3 also works, and after bishop a3, rook f7. After f3, here's what I thought. Okay, so I could take, and I could keep this guy permanently weak. But then I thought, is it worth it? Is it worth it to allow white's knight to come in to come to a really good square? And eventually I said, I like the idea that white's pawn here is weak, but I feel like I'm conceding too much. So that was my thought process. So I went with bishop h6. Looking at the pawn, and after queen e2, bishop e6, I was just developing, getting the knight out, maybe starting to think about queen here, rook here, pushing. Maybe. But then our friend Sethey just went all kabonkers, and I was like, ooh, jeez. And after d takes, I just took it right away. I was like, don't think that was worth it. F takes, and I said, let's go for the weaker pawn, right? Let's go for him again, because we saw that he was the weak one in the previous life, and we're going to continue hammering in on that. E takes f5, bishop takes e3. And you can notice that I'm ready to enter this f2 square very soon. King h1, rook takes f5. And at this moment, I blundered. Now it's not easy to see, but I sort of realized it after I played it. The move h3. And it's a very simple concept. The idea is that once the knight moves, the queen takes the bishop because the knight is guarding the bishop here. Right? So what do? Queen g5. Very tricky. Because after h takes g4, good old queen h6. Bam. Look at that. Bishop's doing his job. And after bishop h3, queen takes, queen h2, rook takes, queen g1, queen takes, and that is checkmate. So of course you're wondering, well, you didn't blunder, right? But guess what? What if I just move the bishop here? Right? And you think, oh, what about this? Yeah, but what about, what was it? Yes. What about g4? It's very complicated. You can't move the rook up because then the queen will take the bishop. If you move your rook here, then very tricky move. Bishop c1. Because after bishop takes, queen takes bishop with check. Right? So, very tricky business. It's not an easy blunder to see, definitely. So after rook takes f5, rook takes, bishop takes, and now I'm threatening this knight f2. Of course, you might think h3 again. I'll play the same thing, queen g5. Except now, I have threats of knight f2, right? And what if you say play knight d1? Just threaten the bishop, threaten the knight. I'm just going to do nothing. I'm going to play knight d7, bring the rook out. Very hard to see. It's a very complicated continuation, but it is how it is. So let us continue, alright? So after rook takes f5, rook takes, bishop takes, rook f1. And at this point, I'm thinking, okay, well, my king's kind of looking kind of bad, and these two pieces should be in the game somehow, right? But instead, I'm a little bit greedy, and I sort of regret it. After bishop takes d4, I sort of regret it. I'm sort of thinking, ugh, gotta take a gamble. I gotta get all the pawns before my king gets all attacked. And here the computer recommends a very interesting move. Rook d1. Pin the bishop to the queen, and after I play something like bringing the knight out, it's as simple as queen check. King g7. Let me just take that piece and get the piece back. So, I'm just saying, it's not easy for me at all. So rook d1 would have been a really amazing move, but it also would have been really hard to spot. So instead, our chess club member played h3, and of course this is a little bit ill-timed, because here I get to play knight to e3. Fork, fork, keep the pressure on the hanging knight. After rook e1, bishop takes c3, threaten that rook, and after rook g1, let me just offer a trade. The trade accepts. Our chess club member Sethey does mouse slip, but that's okay. I give him a chance. But now, another hanging piece I'll take. Rook f8. A beautiful skewer. And look at that. I start converting. I start throwing in the pieces. And, of course, the mate will come. Not an easy mate for sure. I would have to think about it, right? Like, for example, I know that the knight is covering this square. The knight needs to cover this square. The bishop covers this square. The knight covers this square. So the only square that needs to be covered is this square. So, of course, knight f2, knight g4 would do the trick as well. So, in terms of what we learned from this game, to me, it felt like I was getting things done on the king side. However, our opponent wasn't getting all that was needed to be done on the queen side. And so that's a really hard thing to master. Knowing knowing your opponent's idea, knowing how to prevent it, but also knowing how to counterattack yourself is a very complicated strategy. And of course, I can't exactly say how to improve other than just, I don't know, maybe search up some grandmaster games. But that's what I'm doing. That's what, at my level, that's how I am improving. We look at grandmaster games, we guess why they move a certain way, and we sort of try to follow them. And basically, in this game, it all started from this chaotic moment. And then the idea of h3 was not so easy to see. And once again, h3 was not so easy to see. But notice how I also made the mistake of being a little bit greedy here. And I didn't get punished for that, but on a regular day I would. And so my life got easier from here. But other than that, I think it's important that we all have fun in playing chess. And of course, I did hope you learned something as well. So thank you.